I'm Alana Burke, CEO of Your Life's Workshop, coach to entrepreneurs and solopreneurs across dozens of industries, and host of Good Business. With nearly 20 years' experience helping hundreds of clients create profitable, ethically driven, and sustainable businesses based on their life's work, I'm here to teach you how to do great work, make great money, and make a positive impact without feeling like you need a shower afterwards. Everybody, today's episode is one of the most important and complicated concepts that any business leader needs to master. Today, we are talking about the giant difference between strategy and tactics. Now, I know that might not seem very interesting on the surface, but let me assure you, this can be, understanding this stuff can be one of the most, critical linchpins in how things change for you. How you view your business, how you think about marketing, how you think about decision making, it's all tied to this. And this fundamental confusion that most people have is kind of everything. So to give you a little bit of context, when I was in grad school, we spent, and this is in a pretty rigorous business school program, we spent 3 very long, intensive seminar weekends learning this. It's not simple. It's not straightforward. And to actually, the concepts are pretty simple. They're pretty basic. We're going to go through it and you'll go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then when you go to try to actually do it and implement it for yourself and apply it to real world situations, that's where it gets really, really sticky and really muddled. So please know that you won't fully wrap your head around it today. Well, you probably won't. But hopefully this episode is really to help you start asking harder questions of yourself and of your business and how you plan and how you think about things. So the goal here today is just to kind of get to a place where you know that you need to ask deeper questions both of yourself and of where your business is going. So just know that going in. So today we're going to cover what strategy is, what tactics are, how they each fit into business planning, how they should fit at least, and why they each matter. So maybe by the end of the episode, you'll understand why the tactics that you are taking aren't working or aren't getting enough impact for what you actually want to accomplish. So first, what is strategy? We're going to get right to it here. Strategy, the best way I can describe what strategy actually is it's like if a chess game had a baby with a vision quest. So it's a critical step in decision making. So and it's one of those things that solopreneurs just completely skip, right? Good strategy is the planning and implementation of your core values and priorities. So think about that again. I'm going to say it again because I know that's a big mouthful of a sentence and it's really important. So good strategy is the planning and implementation of your core values and priorities. So you have to know what your values and priorities are before you can actually do real solid strategy. So it takes the needs of your stakeholders, it takes the needs of your clients, it takes the needs of your potential clients, and it takes your own desires and goals into consideration. And before I just kind of glaze right past that big statement, I want to break down who your stakeholders are. So this is a little bit of a sidebar here. Your stakeholders are, in bigger business, we refer to shareholders and stakeholders, right? Shareholders are the ones that hold the money. They're the ones that are you have to consider their needs first because they're the ones funding you. Stakeholders are anyone your business affects. It's anyone that your actions are going to cause changes for, right? So that could be your spouse. It could be, you're one of your stakeholders, right? It could be your children. It could be your friends. It could be your family. It could be contractors who work for you. It could be employees who work for you. Your stakeholders are anybody affected by your business. Your customers, in a way, are actually stakeholders too. So as you consider your strategy, you have to actually consider all of those people and what their needs are and how your actions are going to affect them. And honestly, if you only start from tactics, you're coming from a place of ego, right? You're trying to market your thing, but you're not actually doing all the work to consider what other people around you who are affected by it need. So we're going to figure out how to undo that and potentially navigate around potential damage and harm that you can do without even realizing it, right? So strategy development is the creation of a path to your goals. It's not all the rocks along the way on the path. It's the actual carving things out, forging a pathway so that you know exactly what solid ground you're standing on. It's the foundation for how you develop a tactical plan. But it's not the tactical plan, right? The tactics can change. They're fluid, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But the strategy part is the thinking far ahead. It's the knowing where the path is supposed to go, and then the tactics are what get you there, okay? So it's one of the filters that you create to run your decisions through. That's the biggest bonus to having a solid strategy in place, is it makes decision making exponentially easier. And I find that most solopreneurs really struggle with this, especially in your first few years. It's rough to make decisions and try to look into a crystal ball, and the stakes are so high, and it's so hard to try to figure out what you should do and how to evaluate ideas and how to evaluate opportunities. Strategy helps with that, because if you know what your strategic plan is, then things start to become an easy no or an easy yes, because it either fits in the plan or it doesn't, right? The hard part, of course, is always going to be staying the course, because that's, sticking with your strategic plan is like a whole other episode in and of itself, right? So we'll talk about that later. So changes can be made along the way to your strategy, but this is important, right? Changes shouldn't be made out of panic or confusion or reactionary behaviors. They should come from a change in conditions. So you have to know enough about your own strategy. This is why having someone else create a marketing strategy for you that kind of happens in a vacuum, where it's not super collaborative, doesn't work usually, and people end up feeling like they didn't get their money's worth because they don't understand that you have to actually, in order to be a CEO, in order to be a leader, you have to learn how to think strategically. It's not optional. It's not something that you can navigate around in a business or hire out entirely. Of course you can hire somebody with a better marketing brain than yours. Great, do that. I'm one of those people. For sure, I want you to do that. You should. But you have to know in your bones that what they've created for you is right, is in alignment. So you at least have to have a strategic understanding of your vision and goals before you ever walk in the door. You can't ask them to create that for you. If they do, it's never going to be in alignment with what you actually want. So make sure that if, when those moments come where the conditions change, and when I say the conditions, I mean the conditions that affect your business. So anything externalized that you don't have control over, that's a change in conditions. So let's say you run your business on the internet primarily, a few of us do that these days. What happens if the internet goes down and is no longer in existence? That's a massive change in conditions. Now, obviously, that's something that I'm going to a wild extreme just to illustrate the point, but that is a massive change in the conditions and the circumstances that affect your business. So therefore, you need to you need to know what to do strategically. You need to be able to think differently, because your strategy was, if your strategy was to reach people worldwide, that stops becoming so easy. It's not impossible, but it might not actually be your goal when you consider the needs of your stakeholders over again, in light of there's no more internet, right? So now you might not be that interested in reaching people worldwide. You might want to reach people only in your community. So that would be a shift in strategy. So you need to know that. You need to be able to see that. And granted, if the internet goes down, I know that the strategy of your business is probably the lowest thing on your priority list, but it's just to illustrate the point. People, go with me, okay? So this is why you gotta learn, right? You can't just pay other people to do it for you. You gotta learn this, okay? So I'm gonna give you a good solid example of what strategy should kind of look like, right? So I'm gonna use a life coach as an example. So say you're a life coach and your goal is to show as many people as possible that they can live a confident life. You have a deep burning need inside you. Your vision is to show millions of people. When you think about your big vision statement, you're like, I want every single person on earth to know that they can live a confident life. That's a huge vision. Another person's could be a life coach and have the exact same vision, only it's completely different in scope. It could be, I'm a life coach and I have a vision of teaching 100 women in my lifetime that they can live a confident life. And they want to start small and go deep, right? They have a different perspective on it. No judgment here, right? We're just talking about how your vision can affect your actual strategy making. So for coach number one who wants to go big and go global, right? Their pricing strategy might be to keep their prices as low as possible so that they can reach as many people to take part in their programs. It might mean that they have a wildly diverse set of programs because they have to consider that they want to reach people multiculturally all over the planet. So different learning styles, different abilities, different life experiences, they have to consider the needs of all of those stakeholders, and they have to think accordingly, right? So their strategic plan could involve keeping prices low, offering a diverse set of options for leadership and guidance, and then they're going to employ tactics that mimic that. And we'll get to that in just a minute. So if you are coach number two, right, who wants to reach 100 people in their lifetime, their strategy might be to have premium pricing, and they're going to reach out and they want to work with people one-to-one only, right? So they're reaching people deeply and one at a time. So they're going to have premium pricing. They're going to have a strategy that involves connecting with people individually. So lots of networking events, etc., would be part of their tactical plan. So again, we'll get to that in a minute. So this leads us to your tactical plan, right? So actually, before I move on, I want to go through one last time, like how strategy asks you to think, okay? So just to wrap up that section, strategy asks you to think, if this, then what? Then if that, then what? So if I do X, people will respond by doing Y, which will mean that I need to do Z so that they can wrap around and do A, and on and on and on, right? It's thinking, if this, then what, right? And go as far out as possible. And the more you know about psychology and human behavior, the easier this becomes, let me tell you. Like, I seriously go back to 2 classes I took in my undergrad that had nothing to do with business. I had a really awesome instructor named Stephen Ducat. I'll never forget him. We're still Facebook friends if he's listening. Hi, Stephen. I took 2 classes with him that they were the only 2 he taught at the time, and it was cross-cultural psychology and political psychology. And they taught me how humans think about information, how humans consume information, how objective correlatives work. And if you don't know what that is, you can go Google. He taught me how to think and predict how people move through the world without judgment. And that's a key thing, right? Like, when we start to think about predicting behaviors of our stakeholders and potential clients, we often have a habit of making assumptions instead of informed judgments. So this is your invitation to dig deeper into human psychology, to learn about the psychology of advertising, to learn about the psychology of how different cultures consume information. This is really useful stuff. And these were 2 undergrad courses that I swear to God, I think I probably use them as much, if not more, than any of my business knowledge. So this leads us to tactics. Let's talk about tactics. Tactics are the easy part. Tactics are the part you probably already know. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time like digging into all the options, but tactics are the actions you take in service of your strategy. A cocktail of tactics are how you implement a strategic plan. So it's the ebooks, it's the courses, it's the podcasts, it's the blog, it's the Instagram, it's the stuff you do, the actions you take. How you do them is dictated by your strategy, right? And the selections you make from the plethora of different tactical options. That's what makes up your strategic plan, right? Or your tactical plan, and how it feeds into your strategic plan. So the 2 are in constant interplay. They have to work together. They have to consider each other. So as you think of your strategy, you have to also consider what tactics you're open to. Like, this is like one of those really important points, is that, and observations that I've made in years of coaching people, that the strategy and tactics, the plans for those things, if they're happening at all, often happen kind of in silos. Like, they're not naturally considering each other, you know? I made this mistake when I started, right? Like, so here's a really good example from my own past of, like, here's what happens when you don't consider your strategy and tactics and what you're capable of as in parallel. So when I first started blogging, when I started making this a million years ago, this is like 11 years ago now, I read somewhere that the more you blog, the faster you'll gain traffic, right? So I decide I'm going to blog every freaking day. So I spend like 2 weeks developing the most detailed content strategy anyone has ever seen in the history of fucking strategies. I'm thinking about how to break down every possible idea that any new entrepreneur might need, right? I'm good at that, right? I'm great at breaking down ideas. It's, part of like one of my superpowers, right? So I was exceedingly good at this. So every single day had a prescribed blog post that I needed to write. You know how many days once I was all finished with this epic fucking content strategy, you know how many days I made it that I actually wrote about what I was supposed to write about, or that I wrote at all for that matter? 3 days. I blogged less than the time it took me to actually develop the strategy for it, because I didn't consider a few things that were realities for me at that point. 1, I had a day job. I didn't have time to actually write that much. 2, I need inspiration in order to create content. I am not I'm not a natural copywriter in that I can sit down and write about a prescribed topic. I'm not wired that way. And since this depended on me as the biggest asset for implementation, probably should have considered that, right? This is what happens when strategy and tactics don't work together. So if you're thinking about a strategy, sometimes you might not be able to have the strategy you want because you don't have the resources for it. So you have to think about what your assets are. You have to take inventory of what you're actually capable of as you think about your strategy, because that's going to come into play when you develop your tactics. So they have to work together. They have to consider each other. They have to hold hands. And usually, when I develop a strategic and tactical plan, I literally do it. I split my screen. And I think about, okay, if I'm developing this strategy, here are the tactics that are going to come into play to implement that strategy. Will those work for me? Right? So say, for example, you go, I want to be a photographer. Well, if your strategic plan for being a photographer is to be, maybe your biggest vision for yourself is, I want to be in the pages of National Geographic. Your non-negotiable tactics that you will have to do, whether you want to or not, is be on Flickr and Instagram, because those are the 2 most visual mediums. That's where people find photographers these days. Those are your 2 non-negotiables if you're starting from zero, have no contacts, and, of course there's other pathways to success, but I'm talking about like if you are sitting down and you're creating a strategic and tactical plan, that's absent of luck and contacts, these are non-negotiables. If you turn your nose up at Instagram or Flickr and you're like, I just will not do that. I'm going to just take pictures and, people will find me. I'll send them out on Facebook or something and the right people will find me. No, they fucking won't, right? There's non-negotiables attached to that. So therefore, your tactics aren't always up to you. Sometimes they're what have to happen for your goals and your vision for yourself. So if you can't do that tactic, then you have to reimagine your vision and your goals. And then you develop a strategy accordingly. So vision, goals, assets, strategy, tactics, those things are all part of the same soup. And they all have to consider each other. So back to tactics. So tactics can change quickly if your strategy supports that, right? But more often than not, it should. But your strategy should move slower and be more contemplative. But beyond that, though, and this is where it gets really, really complicated, tactics can inform your strategy, but only when you really, really, really fucking really know what you're doing. See, changing strategy based on what's happening in your tactics is one of those skills that you don't get to do until you've mastered the right way, right? It's like one of those things you can't break the rules until you've mastered them. Like writing, like you have to write in complete sentences until you really nail how to write great complete sentences, and then you can write broken or run-on sentences because you know the rules and you've mastered them. So notice that. So what I mean by that, though, just to kind of help an understanding, is sometimes, like, let's say, we were just talking about Instagram, so we'll stick with that. So let's say one of your tactics is to implement daily Instagram lives in support of whatever your vision is, right? And because you have a communication-based strategy in place, so you need to put yourself out there more. So you're doing Instagram lives. One of them goes viral. And all of a sudden you go from having 300 followers to having 30,000 followers practically overnight. That would be a perfect example of when your strategy is going to need to change in reflection of something that happened as a result of your tactics. So this is where understanding this stuff, and again, learning how to do it instead of asking someone to do it for you, that's where this comes into play, strong and fierce, is usually in moments of success. But the mistake people make is it's in moments of failure in their tactics that they change their strategy instead of staying the course. So notice the difference. You should only be changing strategy when you've really given your tactics their all. Like you've really stuck with it for an extended amount of time. You've given it everything you've got because you put the thinking in. You're doing the right thing because you put the thinking in and you know that you're doing the right thing. So the only time a tactic should really inform a change in strategy is if it's positive, right? So you had a runaway success that you weren't anticipating and your strategy wasn't big enough to hold it. So then you need to expand your strategy. Or, this is the other thing, right? What if you didn't want 30,000 followers? What if you're that person, that life coach who only wanted 100 people in their business for the rest of their life and they want small, intimate, and quiet? And they accidentally went viral because they said something brilliant that caught on like wildfire. Then what do? Well, then maybe your strategy changes. Maybe you actually take yourself out of the equation. Maybe you stop doing Instagram, right? Maybe you withdraw from that because it doesn't fit into your actual vision and goals. So anytime you have an outlier, anytime you have a success that you're not expecting or a massive failure that you're not expecting, you have to evaluate whether your vision has changed before you change any strategy. Okay? So again, this is a primer. You could probably listen to all the things I just said about 15 times and still struggle to wrap your head around it. Frankly, I struggle to wrap my head around it. As I'm saying it, this was the longest outline I've written for a podcast episode yet because I needed so many notes to make sure I can hold all this stuff. It's complicated, you guys. It's really fucking hard. So if you're feeling lost, know that that's totally legit. If you're totally on it, you might have more of a strategic mind than you realized, right? So I want to go through, let's see. So here's what people do instead of mastering the rules. They come up with an idea, and then instead of setting a vision for themselves and working on a clear strategy to achieve it, they go straight into marketing. They go, how do I market my thing, right? I created a thing. How do I market my thing? How do I get people to buy it? Which is the wrong question to ask. It's like, that's like the fifth question on the list of important questions for building a business. How to get people to buy it should be a lot lower on the list than it is for most people. So unless you know that strategic thinking is even a thing that you're supposed to be doing, it'll look a lot like, what social media should I focus on? And that will happen. That decision will get made by which one you like the most. Again, not strategic, not even really tactical. Like there's no consideration there whatsoever. It's just preference. You haven't even thought about what your stakeholders need. You haven't thought about where your people might hang out. You haven't thought about what their values are and how they interplay into your biggest vision, right? So if that's you and you're banging your head against a wall going, why isn't anything working? This is fucking why, okay? Because you haven't done all the things. You haven't done all the steps. Building a business is not something you snap your fingers and do. It requires a profound amount of skill and a profound amount of patience and a profound amount of thought. Just like anything else, you have to master it. If you're going to be a CEO, if you're going to be successful, if you're going to actually learn how to be in business, not just starting something because the internet makes it easy now, then you got to learn how to do all this stuff too. So what it should look like is something more along the lines of the following. And now I'm going to read this because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. This is what I call the 1-paragraph business plan. And I didn't steal that from anybody, but I'm sure there's probably somebody out there who has a trademark on it. So this is just what I call it. I didn't steal it from you. If you're out there listening, I'm sorry if it's the same name. It's unintentional, I promise. I developed this myself for sure. And maybe I'll look into trademarking it at some point. But right now, it's just for your own knowledge. And it was off the top of my head. So I have an idea that idea solves this one really big problem for this one specific group of people who highly value X, Y, and Z. My biggest vision for this idea is Y. And that's the letter Y. These are just blanks. They're placeholders. So my strategy is to connect deeply with those people and build trust so they feel invested in working with me to solve that problem. And then that's your strategic statement, right? Then here comes the tactics. I'm going to do this by leveraging daily Instagram stories which address specific collateral issues that draw their attention to the collateral issues around their core problem. Okay, I'm sure everybody got that, right? You just wrapped your head around that. So I'm going to do this. I'll read it one more time. I think that's what I'm going to do. So obviously I bounced around a little bit between generalizations and some specific tactics. That's mostly just so that you can understand the difference. I don't need to go into like a hypothetical business, but maybe we'll go ahead and do the 2 life coaches from earlier, right? So I'm just doing this like off the cuff, you guys. So I'm probably going to trip over it a little bit, but okay. I'm a life coach. I want to reach as many people globally as I possibly can and show every person on planet Earth that they can live a confident life. So here's my idea. I'm going to create a life coaching business to access and show every single person on Earth that they can live a confident life. That idea solves this one really big important problem that self-confidence is waning among people worldwide. And people feel less confident than they ever have before. The people that are my people highly value integrity and honesty and delivering on your promises. My biggest vision for this idea is that every single person on Earth will be impacted by my work. My strategy is to connect with those people in a way that they can understand that I have what they need. So I want to make it as accessible as possible to them. I'm going to do this by heavily leveraging every free platform that's global that I can find. So I'm going to have a YouTube channel. I'm going to have an Instagram feed. I'm going to be on Facebook. I'm going to do lives. I'm going to have a podcast. I'm going to have a blog. I'm going to be everywhere I can that's free information for people to consume. And then I'm going to tactically offer low-priced courses and I'm going to work on volume. My goal is to sell as much as I can to as many people as I can, tactically, right? So that's a really rough and tumble off the top of my head hypothetical 1 paragraph business plan for that vision, right? I'm not going to do the other one because I want to go into something a little bit deeper, but that at least gives you kind of a wrap up on the earlier, closing that loop on the earlier example. So once you know what you're doing for your people, what your product's superpowers are, you can nail the tactics without doubting yourself like crazy. It becomes easy to decide on what your tactics are because they feed into something. They're not just happening in a vacuum, right? So I want to wrap up with our 1 paragraph business plan. This is what's created for the Good Business Company and the Good Business Podcast by extension, right? So I figured turnabout's fair play, right? I had to do this work and figure it out as I started the Good Business Podcast as the first endeavor in the Good Business Company, right? So the idea is to create a learning and communications engine for aspiring and existing entrepreneurs who value integrity, rebellion, and service above cash and ego. My biggest vision for the Good Business Company is that it becomes the first stop for every new entrepreneur and continues to be the place you come back to again and again when you want to learn new things with depth, care, and mastery. Our strategy is to position the Good Business Company as a top-of-mind source for no bullshit business leadership by setting an exceedingly high standard for the quality of our content, the participant of our endeavors, and the balanced value that we generate. Some of the tactics we will employ include starting a podcast, hi podcast listeners, generating an active Instagram community, and creating affordable, high-quality educational pieces. So there you have it. That is our 1 paragraph business plan. That nails it, right? It boils it down in something simple. You know what my vision is. You know who I want to talk to. you know what our strategy is to meet that, and you know what some of the tactics that we're going to do along the way, right? I don't tend to develop really detailed tactical plans for myself because I like the ability to be a little more nimble. That's why you got some generalizations there. I would suggest if you're just out the gate that you make your tactical plan way more specific. And here's the thing about a tactical plan, and this is the last thing, this is what we're going to wrap up with today, is that a strategic plan can be a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year. You should be kind of looking out at different stages, but looking pretty far in advance. A tactical plan can be your tactics for the next 6 months, the next 6 years, the next 6 decades. I mean, but you want to make sure that your tactical plan is nimble enough to be changed based on the ever-changing climate of the internet, right? And of what tactics are available to you. So you've got to keep your eyes open, right? Because you might have tactics pop up that you didn't even think about when you initially created your plan. You know, there's new platforms, new software, new opportunities all the time. Don't be afraid to add new tactics. Just make sure you're running them through your strategic filter. All right, everybody. That's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening about strategy and tactics. It's always a pleasure. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to head on over to Instagram and you can ask them in the threads there, okay? We are the Good Business Co. on Instagram. Please come over and follow us. We'd love to have you. And we do giveaways and all kinds of fun stuff over there. Okay, you guys have a great week and see you next time. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. For more information, visit thegoodbusiness.co or yourlifesworkshop.com.